Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kara and today's video is going to be all of the books that I read in 2021. If you've watched some of my videos in the past, you might be wondering why I'm posting a video about books and not something that's real estate related or Asheville related, but this is a video that I've always wanted to film and I just figured, why not? You know, why not end off the year with a video that I would really love to do? So today's video, as I said, I'm going to be sharing all the books that I read this year, and I'm just going to go through each one and kind of give you a brief overview of what the book is about and my thoughts on it and kind of if I would recommend it or not. So there are also some that I read this year that I don't have with me. One of them I had lent from a friend that I already gave back, and a couple other ones I had already given away. So I don't have all of them, but I do have most of them. So my goal this year was to read 12 books, so effectively one a month, and I'm still a little bit short of that goal. I think I read like 10 or so maybe, but in any case, let's jump right into it. So the first book that I read this year is The Bitcoin Standard, and honestly, I cannot recommend this book enough. This is easily one of my top 3 favorite books that I have ever read. Last year in like March and April, I really dove pretty heavy into crypto, learning about it and investing in it and just really getting into it. And I picked up this book. It was a recommendation from a YouTuber that I watch, and it is just so good. And I will preface this with the fact that I don't have any sort of traditional finance background, but this book is honestly for anyone. So it doesn't matter if you don't know anything about finance or if you know a lot about it. Basically, the book goes into the history of money from, you know, trading seashells all the way up to our current monetary system and all the issues with it and how crypto can actually benefit us and why it's such a great thing. So in addition to me loving books, another one of my passions is crypto, and that's another topic that I could just talk on and on about. But in order to not have this video continue to drag on, long story short, 5 out of 5 for this one. Highly recommend. If you see the bookmark here, I'm actually reading this book again, so twice in 1 year. Seriously, go get this book. The second book that I read, I actually don't have a copy of in person. I just have it pulled up on my Goodreads. I'm not sure if you guys have an account on there, but I'll leave the link to my account if you want to go follow me and see what I'm reading. But the next book that I read was all of Kitteridge, which I'd say that may be one of the worst books I've ever read, to be quite honest. I would rate that 1 out of 5 for sure. It basically, there's no point to the book in my opinion. Each chapter has different people and there's no real storyline that flows through the book from start to finish. I read maybe the first 100 pages of it, so I really gave it a good try and really hated it. It was so depressing. I mean, like, to give you an example, one of the chapters was this guy who was married to a woman for like 20 years and then went and cheated on her. And another chapter was this lady who like ruined her, I want to say it was her son's new wife. Like she didn't like his new wife, and so she like destroyed all of her clothes by like writing in Sharpie on them or like cutting them up or something. I don't really remember a whole lot of it, to be honest. I just remember being really depressed after reading every chapter, and I'm like, why am I reading this? This is pretty miserable. Some people love it for whatever reason. I hated it, so I don't personally recommend that one. If you liked it, sorry, not for me. The third book that I read this year was My Brilliant Friend. I realize I'm not mentioning the author's name, so I'll start doing that. My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This was actually a gift from a friend of mine last Christmas. I'm Italian, and this book is one of the more highly rated books in Italy, and so she gifted this to me, and honestly, it wasn't a bad book. I rate it probably 3 out of 5. It wasn't poorly written. My issue with it though was that there wasn't any sort of plot or storyline that kind of kept you engaged in the book. So I didn't really feel any sort of connection with the characters. And I personally also love a book where they kind of go into detail about what the landscape looks like. So I was kind of looking forward to hearing about like the Italian countryside or the coastline. And I just didn't really get a good visual representation of where the characters were in Italy, and I don't know, I wouldn't say it was a bad book, but not one of my top ones. The next book that I read is more of a popular one, and it is Looking for Alaska by John Green. This one I really enjoyed. I read his other book, The Fault in Our Stars, I think it's called, that really popular book where they made a movie out of it. I read that book last year, really loved it. Of course, it's kind of a sad story, but they somehow made it a little funny at times, and I definitely would recommend that one too. This one was pretty good. I don't have anything bad to say about it. It kind of was more of, I guess, like a young adult book, so it kind of reminded me of like how I used to think in college, which isn't a bad thing. I kind of enjoyed that. It was kind of a nice escape from reality. But yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. It wasn't something that I necessarily learned anything from, but if you're just looking for a book to kind of get your mind off of work or something that's stressing you out, then it's definitely a great option for that. And it was pretty funny too, so if you like books that make you laugh, then I'd recommend it. The next book that I have is The Boy Next Door by Meg Cabot. Now, this I have had, I mean, geez, honestly, like freshman year of high school or something. I don't know. Obviously, you could probably tell by the title and just kind of the way it looks. This one is definitely a young adult book, or even like a teen book, I would say. It's just one that's been on my bookshelf for a long time, and I never actually read it, so I just thought I'd pick it up. And it was, I think, in April or May that I read it, and I was kind of stressed from moving and just wanted something to kind of detach myself. You can kind of see a theme with the last book and this one. Kind of wanted to detach from reality, and it was just that. It was very easy to read. It's kind of interesting in that, just to give you an idea, like the book is all in like email form, so there's no, I don't think there were true chapters. I think it was just like a long stream of email conversation, which might sound weird and difficult to read, but she made it work somehow. So I would say I wouldn't necessarily recommend this book to most people because it is like a teen or young adult book, but again, it was a good escape from reality, so not a bad one there. The next book that I read was also to get kind of an escape from reality, and that is Saifedean by Nicholas Sparks. So I picked this one up because obviously Nicholas Sparks is a very popular author. I've read a couple of his other books. I, thought it'd be a nice like summer read. And this was well written. I would say that I enjoyed it, but it was nothing like what I thought it was going to be. So I thought that, Nicholas Sparks, it's going to be, romantic and kind of like light and not really dark or depressing. But this one actually kind of was. So the premise of the book is this girl who is in an abusive relationship, and she runs away from the guy that she's with multiple states away to just kind of live in privacy and to get away from this guy. And I won't give it away if you do want to read it, but basically the guy ends up seeking her out, and there's this whole big scene at the end of the book. So it was definitely more of a thriller type of book, not your classic romantic book that I would say Nicholas Sparks is typically known for. But if you like more scary books, then this might be one that you're interested in. I personally don't really like horror books or anything, so I don't even know that I would classify this as that, but it's kind of somewhere in between. The next book I'm sure all of you have heard of, and that is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. So this was the last book that I had to read in the series. I read all of the prior ones and really enjoyed them. I know that a lot of people will be surprised by this, but this was actually my first time reading through the whole Harry Potter series. I had watched the movies, you know, when they came out, but I never actually read the books. I want to say I read the first book years and years ago, and I meant to read the others, but I just never did. So I decided that over the past couple years I would read through them, and I did, and I watched all the movies. Kind of after each book I would watch the movie and then read the next book, watch the movie, and I really enjoyed that. I would say Harry Potter is not my favorite series. I don't necessarily even have a favorite series, but I do think it was well written. I love the movies, and I would recommend it. The next book is another one that I don't have in person. And, you know, I said that that Olive Kitteridge one was the worst book that I had read, but this one is right on par with that. I did not understand this book whatsoever. This was The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I thought it would be good for me to pick up a classic because it's not really something that I typically lean towards. Honestly, despite the books that I'm listing today, I typically lean towards nonfiction books, so I don't normally pick up classic books to read. This one was lent to me by a friend, and I was told that it was going to be a really good book, but I could not get into it whatsoever. It made no sense. There was no plot. It wasn't even that the language was necessarily confusing, but it just made no sense. Like, I wish I had the book here, honestly, so that I could read you a part of it, because it's just so weird. Literally, I'll just try to think of something. Like, the main character would say, "Hey, want to get a drink?" And the other person would say, "Sure." "Okay, where do you want to go?" "Let's go here." "Okay." And then they sit down, and honestly, this went on for like 50 pages. That's all they would do. They would just go somewhere, eat, go somewhere, drink. There was not really any sort of meaningful discussion, and I really didn't understand this book. I looked up a little bit more about it, and apparently it's supposed to be kind of like making fun of the people in the time that it was written, and it's supposed to kind of be an annoying book, I guess, but I don't really understand the point of reading it. So that one was not for me. Give that one a 1 out of 5. The next book that I read is The Beginner's Guide to Stoicism, Tools for Emotional Resilience and Positivity by Matthew Van Natta. So this book I really enjoyed. I want to say that Ian got me this last year for Christmas. I really enjoyed this book. It's, as you can tell, like a pretty small book. And you know, it says it's just a beginner's guide. So if you know nothing about Stoicism, this would be a perfect one to pick up. I will say it's so packed with information that when he references things later in the book that he talked about earlier in the book, I honestly got confused about halfway in. Like, he's referencing things that I don't really remember because he mentioned them in one sentence. So I would say if you pick up this book, definitely take your time with it, maybe even take notes, read it slowly to really absorb everything. So in this book, he talks about the history of Stoicism, and then also talks about kind of the main points of Stoicism and how you can implement them into your daily life. And to be honest, while I did really enjoy this book, I don't know how much I really maintained because, like I said, it was so jam-packed with information. I'd probably have to read this book maybe 2 or 3 times more to really feel like I understood it. But in reality, I don't typically like to reread books, so despite the Bitcoin Standard one, love that one. But I honestly would probably just pick up a different book on Stoicism, but I still would definitely recommend this one. Like I said, just take your time with it, and there's definitely some really good wisdom in here. So if that's something that you're looking for, it might be a perfect read to start out 2022. The next book that I read is A Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. And this book is a classic environmental book. I've mentioned this in a couple videos before, but for those of you that don't know, my background is actually in environmental science. So I have Bachelor of Science degrees in environmental science as well as geography. And I actually just applied to be a member of the Sustainability Committee of Asheville this week. So fingers crossed I get that. It's just kind of a volunteer type of thing. But I really want to start getting involved more with environmental preservation and protection around Asheville and just promoting sustainable living. So that's kind of a side note. Let me get back to this book. So this is a very classic environmental book. You've probably heard of Aldo Leopold. I've always wanted to read this book, and honestly, I wouldn't say I was let down. I did enjoy reading this book, but it is not the type of book that you can just pick up and read a couple pages of and then put back down. This book was written around the late 40s, 50s, sometime around there, and the writing style is just quite different. So once you kind of get into it and get into the flow of the writing style, it's really good, but it definitely takes a few pages to get there. I also thought I was going to finish this book a lot quicker than I did. As you can see, it's a pretty tiny book. It's only, I think, like 200 pages. Yeah, like 225 pages. But it actually took me like 2 or 3 months to finish. And I think a lot of that was because at the end of a long day, it was kind of difficult for me to jump into a book that was kind of hard to get into. You know, I was already mentally drained from the day, and having to really put forth a lot of mental energy to get into a book wasn't necessarily that appealing. So it did take me a little bit longer to read. But I would say if you have any interest in environmental protection or just kind of classic environmental literature, then this would be one that I would still recommend if you just know that you have to take the time to kind of get into it. And another thing I loved about this one too is that he has, sorry for the dog in the background, by the way, my apartment is very close to the dog park in our complex, so that's what's going on in the background. But one of the things that I love about this book are all of the little sketches. So I'll show you. You can see there's like all these little sketches in here, and I just found that so cool. Let me show you like another one. And it's just really nice to read. I know when I was younger, I always loved reading books that had, you know, drawings or pictures in them. So it's kind of like an adult version of that. Here's another one. Like, how cute is this? Anyways, so I would recommend it if you have any interest in the environmental field. The next book that I read is this one, and I'm not going to go into this because this is a business channel. So moving on. The next book I thought about not including because I'm not done with it yet, but it's The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. And this is a very, very popular book. Personally, I don't tend to be a religious person, so it's a little bit odd, I guess, that I would pick up this book, but it's been on my bookshelf for a really long time. It's really highly rated, and to be honest, I'm actually really enjoying it. So the writing is actually very, very good. It's really easy for pretty much anyone to understand. There are a lot of references to the Bible and kind of other religious texts, and I'm really truthfully enjoying it. I'm only, I think, yeah, only like 50 pages into it right now, but yeah, I would say that this is probably a good one for anyone, regardless of kind of what your religious background is. Like I said, I don't tend to be a religious person, but I'm enjoying this. So that is everything that I have for you guys. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be. I feel like I rambled quite a bit, but as I said, I get really passionate about books. This is going to be my last video of 2021. I really want to thank you guys for sticking around until the end of this video, and also to everyone that has subscribed to my channel this year and supported my channel by either liking my videos, commenting on them, sharing them, subscribing. It all means so much to me, and it's so cool to see you guys following me along on my journey, you know, moving to Asheville in March and just everything that has happened since then. So if you're not subscribed already, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and leave me a comment below. Let me know if you liked this kind of video and if you would like to see more like this in the future. But I think I'm gonna end this here. Thank you guys so much again, and I will see you guys next year in 2020. No, what? Not 2020. Not going back to 2020. I will see you guys very soon in 2022.